Catus Maximus here. Decided to do a video that's just a general inclusive video of work gloves. We'll start off with synthetic type gloves and then move on to leathers and even some ones like these over here, which we have are pigskin. This table is piled high, and I'll actually try to keep this shorter than my other classic review and comparisons. The point and relevancy of this video is it's one place where you can go to say, like, what are like a variety of different styles of gloves, and what are maybe some of the aspects that set really cheap ones versus expensive ones when they do apparently look very similar or the same. And just to show just the microcosm of the huge variety of gloves, shoes, boots, footwear, gloves, those types of textiles, things that people wear, there's always huge varieties. I don't have any super expensive gloves in here either, which are, there are gloves that are $50, $100 a pair, work gloves that are really designed to last years, that you properly oil and, don't leave out in the rain. Anyway, we have, these are actually some nicer Semperguard, but we have the traditional nitrile gloves, blue. They actually come in a variety of different colors. We even have some nice clean room gloves. I did a review of those by themselves. But these are pretty much the current standard. A high quality nitrile will be pretty tear resistant. It's resistant to a wide variety of chemicals. And more importantly, is hypoallergenic versus latex. The reason latex does cause irritation is because it's made out of tree sap, and the actual point to that rubber tree sap is that it's an irritant, and then it encases any wood-boring beetles and those types of things. And so it's actually its intention by nature is to be irritating, so that's why so many people have issues with it. But it is resistant to some certain things. And it always makes it a reasonable value. I should say I don't know all the things, but I know that there's specific chemicals that I believe that latex is more resistant to than nitrile, but it's nowhere near as wide as the nitrile ones. So they do fit nicely because of the stretchiness. So the nitrile ones, once again, come in purple, grays, different colors, various thicknesses. I do recommend avoiding the cheap ones because nitrile is something that they'll make really thin. Cheap gloves say that they're nitrile gloves, but they'll just be so hair thin that as soon as you catch them on the corner or anything, they split. And it's also because they're using a lower grade nitrile. When you get higher grade gloves like these, here's a pair of them that I've unboxed. Their nitrile can feel the same thickness as other ones, but they can be far more tear resistant. So that's kind of the point. And when you get really high-end nitrile, this is kind of how they come, really expensive clean room packaging. These are really long cuff, big latex gloves for general cleanup. They are class 100 clean room gloves. It's kind of basic. I guess class 100 would be closer to an operating room. There are class 1 clean rooms. This is actually, when they talk about clean room classes, that's literally parts per cubic foot of particulate. Literally meaning these are certified for rooms that have less than 100 particles of dust per cubic foot of air. A class 1 clean room will have less than 1 particle of dust per cubic foot of air. And yes, modern microprocessors need rooms that are 1,000 times cleaner than an operating room. But that's what some nice latex ones. These are some Gorilla Grips with the General, Harbor Freight, Hardys. These are the kind of semi-spandex weave. These are just the cheap, normal, they're sold for $1, $2 actually, I think, at Harbor Freight, and then they're dipped in just a plastic kind of PVC coating. These dipped style gloves, there's a vast variety of them and a vast difference in qualities. Just the basic Harbor Freight ones, they're okay for just kind of general stuff if you're moving or something like that. But if you're doing a lot of gardening, they're not great because the open weave, allows a bunch of dust to get in. But they are better in hot weather just because they provide a little bit more breathability. Just the problem with cheap ones is that they fall apart, 1, and 2, they don't use a very good grade of PVC. So as you use the glove and the gloves get stretched, all the PVC just starts micro-cracking and peeling apart, and then it's just like wearing a mesh cloth glove and your hands get dirty anyway. So I used to really get the cheap ones, but they just annoy me so much that I do like nicer ones. Some nicer ones might be these Atlas gloves. These just have a much thicker, much higher quality PVC coating on them. Just a little bit thicker of material that they're using to build out of them. So Atlas ones are nice. We also have some Spirian ones, which kind of look like any old blue dipped glove, such as these flex grips, which are actually pretty nice, but the Spirians are known as being actually a real premium version of a PVC dipped glove. Always just really nice, really supple PVC. They actually last a surprising amount of time, and just a little bit taller and tighter of a cuff, so it prevents particles from getting into your wrist. That's what's always nice about these types of stretch gloves. The flex grips are a bit cheaper. You can usually get a whole 12 pack of these for like 20 bucks or something, and 25 bucks. And I like them. They're kind of a good standby, and they're definitely much more reliable than the Harbor Freights. They're about as cheap as I would go with the dipped gloves that I actually have some reliance on. We have a couple different sets of more specialty ones here. Both of these gloves are built similarly. These are these cut-resistant PVC dip gloves. I always forget the name of these, AZ USA or something. Cut-resistant gloves are a mixture between, usually it's either a proprietary fiber or just polyester, but it's 30% polyester, 30% like Kevlar, and then 30% actually stainless steel microfiber wires. On the packaging here, it shows you. And so that's the idea with these, is they're supposed to resist being cut with while handling sharp edges of sheet metal, glass, things like that. Maybe you're handling knives in a kitchen, cleaning knives. This is a type of glove that you would wear that just general hits won't cut. These certainly can be cut with scissors or if you press hard. And if you're in a type of situation where you may actually have something really sliding across with pressure, even though these will resist cutting, you can still saw through them. Especially sheet metal, which is the edges of sheet metal are more like microfine saw teeth. And in that case, you would actually wear a pair of gloves like these with another pair of, leather gloves literally over the top of them just to deal with that. So anyway, that's the deal. And if you ever wonder, well, maybe you see some of these dip gloves and they're really expensive, usually that's what they are, is they're going to be cut resistant. See, these will say cut resistant on them. And just to let people know, there are those kind of specialty gloves. Those are really ones you don't want to leave outside. These are another type of glass handling glove, but these are more of a pure Kevlar glove, and they actually work pretty well. What I like about these is just they have the more traditional dots and are super breathable. So in hot weather, these actually do better than the dipped ones. Just if you have sweaty hands. And having the whole glove just be heavy-duty Kevlar really is a pretty abrasion-resistant glove. So I wanted to point that out. Let's get in. Oh, and then Kingco is a really good brand. They have a whole bunch of different gloves. One of the nice things I like how they set themselves apart is they have a whole bunch of winter oriented work gloves. And so these are actually a really nice dipped glove, but we can see that they have like a heavy sweater material. And they have a nice fleece lining. So if you're working in the winter, look up some Kingcos, and they have all these nice insulated gloves. There's all sorts of grades, leathers, etc., etc. They're all pretty high quality. And gosh, it's sure nice to have a set of insulated gloves when you're working in cold weather, and they certainly do make them. We have these would just be some general cleanup gloves. These would be entirely PVC dipped gloves. These are, of course, the same material that these gloves are dipped in, but they're for more heavy-duty, you might say janitorial work, general shop cleanup work. If you work in a machine shop or anything like that, you clean out machine coolant sumps. These would be the type of general gloves you might use with that. And so they might be considered very heavy-duty kitchen gloves. They're usually fiber lined, so you can get your hands in and out of them. And they're always kind of funky. They only last so long before the vinyl eventually tears at one point or another. But that's what these are for. This next set is actually the more of a hazardous material gloves, and these are a neoprene. Neoprene is resistant to a wide variety of chemicals. In many situations, you would actually don a set of nitrile gloves and then put neoprene gloves over them. This is where the type of gloves where if you're dealing with unknown substances, or you're having to clean up any kind of chemicals, that's really what you would want, is some neoprene gloves. And these are the type of things you would really want, some high quality ones, because it's important, and they're always heavily molded. They're definitely the big heavy duty, you know, alien invasion hazmat gloves. Easiest way to put it, but neoprene gloves are the ones you want when you really want some good protection against any kind of things you may be picking up related to being potentially hazardous. And then we'll just get into some animal skin. These are actually some pig skin. The pigskin gloves are always really nice. They tend to be a bit more expensive. One good tip about finding good various forms of animal skin gloves is in the garden sections at many department stores. They'll have a wide variety of gloves, some pretty nice ones. And gardening gloves, there's no difference between a gardening glove and a work glove. The gardening glove is a form of a work glove, so it's a good place to look, and it's kind of surprising the little gems you may find in stores that you think, God, they don't sell tools or anything, but they do have a garden section, and somehow they end up with some nice gloves, and a lot of times they may end up being much cheaper at a small little store than some big department store. And so those are the type of gloves, if you just want a general leather glove that doesn't get super hard super fast and turn into a piece of cardboard, try the pigskin gloves. Do have some Carhartt gloves. These are just some general style work gloves, but Carhartt basic gloves aren't too bad. They have an extra layer right there across the palm. What I've always liked about these is they're kind of like the standard open cuff. This style of glove is like the universal work glove. But these have actually a closed wrist, which is nice if you're doing like construction cleanup, doing yard cleanup, that kind of thing. That way you don't get particles running down inside the glove. It's something that has forever annoyed me. And then we have a wide variety of welding gloves. If you're looking for really heavy-duty gloves for a reasonable price, go to a welding supply. They always have a nice selection. And the thing about welding and why they have a wide selection is because you want to have basically as light and as flexible and as easy to use glove as you can get away with, given the type of welding that you're doing, how much heat you're dealing with. So if you're doing stick welding where there's lots of spatter, you're going to have your hands really, really close to a large amount of heat and a big spark. That's why you have these big, thick, heavily insulated stick welding gloves. But if you're doing delicate TIG welding or more delicate MIG welding, these types of gloves are also very inconvenient, cause your hands to cramp up quicker, and so they have lighter and lighter grades. These might be just a work glove, really, because they have a short cuff, but you can do some, basic quick welding. It's just kind of nice that we have some Tillmans, and what they do here is they use cow leather on the back, which makes sense, and then they use pig skin on the actual working area. And I always thought that was a nice compromise. And then their other compromise, which is a nice touch, is when you're wearing gloves, a lot of times when you're picking stuff up, it's between the thumb and the index finger, and you can see they wrap the leather about halfway up the finger. And so those would be some of the aspects of a nicer pair of gloves, is just attention to detail. And then we get more into various welding gloves. Here's some Tillman Onyxes, so it's always kind of cool because you don't have to get traditional colors. You can get these cool black gloves. So these would be like a nice TIG welding glove. They're actually pretty thin, but offer more than enough protection. Pretty nice, tight fitting. You could almost call these, I wouldn't say that they were driving gloves, but they're pretty close. They are definitely pretty close. I've always liked the Tillman Onyxes. And just to give you an idea, you can get these really nice tight-fitting gloves, and they're actually for welding. And that way you can have nice hand feel. Thinner leather means that you can get more feel for your fingers. So if you're doing that delicate TIG welding, you can maintain a lot of precision and not have to worry so much about cramping hands. And it just continues to go up from there. These are some pigskin TIG gloves. I think the Onyxes are better because they're just a little bit thinner and more flexible, but these are just a little bit heavier duty, and it just keeps kind of going up through the line on welding gloves. Whenever I see them on sale, I always kind of get them because I like the tall cuffs, and welding gloves have always, especially, these Tillmans and Millers have always been pretty good. I wanted to show some of these Millers as we go through. These actually have a whole bunch of padded sections throughout the palm of the glove just to help reduce operator fatigue. And then we get into these. These might be considered stick welding gloves, but they're really known as MIG welding. MIG welding produces, it's kind of intermediate as far as the amount of heat and spatter, and so these would be an intermediate glove where you have a bit more thermal insulation and padding around the lower part of the glove, but they're still kind of thin and lightweight. And then we get into stick welding gloves. We have some various brands, you know, Pro Stars, Radners, and the Pro Stars are just like a little bit lighter duty. These, or excuse me, the Radners are, I should say. The Pro Stars are just a little bit heavier duty. And then ones I would recommend are these weld marks. I've always really liked the weld mark ones. When I took stick welding, these always held up really well. Tons of insulation. These are the gloves that are infamous where somebody will be stick welding on a piece of steel until it is literally glowing red hot, and then pick it up with these gloves. And you can get away with it for 5-10 seconds. The gloves are actually starting to catch fire before you drop it, but they will prevent you from getting burned. It'll ruin the pair of gloves, but they really work that well. And finally, finishing off this long video, we have what is the open kind of firm or card cuff work gloves. As you can see, I have a whole bunch of 9 pairs of gloves here, and they are all copies of each other, and I don't know where or how this design ended up becoming. And it's not just in the United States. I use YouTube videos from all over the world, and these are the style of the gloves. So I had reviewed these 2 pairs of Harbor Freights. They're super cheap, $9 for 5, and they're slightly more expensive, slightly better quality yellow and black Harbor Freights. And I forgot to mention that these types of dyed gloves you do need to watch out for, and it is true on these Harbor Freights, is that if they get wet, then the coloring, your hand, like on these gloves, if you work and where they get all wet, you'll end up with black dye in your hands, and you have to be careful of that, and you have to be careful of that with any kind of premium leather glove, because an all leather glove where they didn't do any washing of the leather after tanning, as soon as you work and sweat in those gloves, all the tanning dyes are going to end up on your hand, and it's kind of gross. So I wanted to mention that about these 2 different Harbor Freights. We have some CLCs, which are just slightly higher quality. You can always just tell by the weight. One of these open cuff work gloves will have double layers of leather on the palm and on the fingers if they're a nicer quality. Really low quality ones like these Harbor Freights just have real paper thin leather, and it feels really kind of stiff, and they can be blown out in just a matter of hours. More premium grade ones are just going to be more weighty. The leather is just going to be a little bit more flexible and supple, and you're going to be able to feel that, oh, this is a higher density material. So it doesn't mean that all gloves of this style are poor quality. It's just the cheap ones are. We have these, which are actually sold as some form of welding gloves or something that came with some type of welding equipment, or just a different take on them where they have a little bit of insulated or a little bit of insulation on the back. Basically the same thing. And I always kind of thought it was odd that they were marketing them with that. And of course, we got red ones. We've got orange ones, which I always kind of liked. Even Stanley, and I thought this was hilarious. These are actual Stanley branded, Stanley tagged gloves, and they initially look like these Harbor Freights back here, but they actually are just a little bit better quality, a little bit thicker leather. But I think it was hilarious that even Stanley got into the game. And even Progressive Car Insurance decided to get their own ones. What a nice bonus. You give an insurance company zillions of dollars and they give you a cheap pair of gloves. Anyway, that's a big long video about all sorts of work gloves and some discussion about work gloves. And now people who are just like, oh, I don't know what's going on with my work gloves, or what's something a little better, can now jump into a video and have an idea about heavy duty gloves, general use gloves, and clean room gloves, synthetic gloves, etc. And just how you can go through there. It's amazing, just all these grades, from like the thin little nitrile gloves and latex gloves all the way up to heavy duty stick welding gloves. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching and subscribing, and if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.